Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I have in sample form, and came from another set of inks provided by another benefactor. This other box contains something like 77 samples, and luckily I had this one, which a long-time viewer and active participant. She actually talks to people online, like leaves messages and stuff, and has for a long while. I forgot to ask if I could say her name, but yeah, she asked if I could review this ink, and luckily this was in with those 70 some odd inks. It's a Baystate. It's Noodler's Baystate Cod Cranberry. Yeah, I hate pink. I hate pink. I hate it so much. Probably in part because I am what is often referred to as a girl, and therefore was given many pink things throughout my life. However, it is a incredibly unflattering color, and like most Baystates, this ink is so bright it causes eye pain. Yeah, so, but the same individual told me that the performance of a Baystate ink can be improved by diluting it a little bit. If you add like 10% water. And so for the last tests, the 3 more absorbent papers, I only used this pen, which is a Platinum Preppy, an 03, which is their fine nib. I added 10% water to see if that would improve the performance. We'll get to that. I also use this. This is a Pilot 78G with a double broad nib, but both the single and double broads are actually stubs in these pens. And this does have a slightly wet flow. And Preppies actually generally have a fairly dry flow, and I haven't used this Preppy since Noodler's Qingxi Huang, because that was also a bright eye painy pink ink, and I've been paranoid to use any other ink in this. However, I thought if anything could trump that, it would be Baystate. So, there you go. Now, I wanted to see if I could find some comparables, and shockingly I did. So here's Cape Cod Cranberry, and here's Qingxi Huang. Pretty close, right? Pretty close. The thing is, Qingxi Huang nearly came out the back of this 35-pound, 25% cotton bond weight paper, and this one didn't. So there's that. Pilot's Mixables Pink, actually very similar, if a bit darker. That one also very nearly came out the back. Diamine's Hope Pink, which is a little lighter and brighter in a different way. And Noodler's, I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, Shaw's Rose. Yeah, it's also a fairly like bright pink, if not as bold and vibrant as that. But yeah. Now the thing is, these 3 pinks right here, they all had a quality that I have not really seen in any other ink. And I think it's interesting that it's these pink inks. I have a wooden desk, and if these 3 inks encountered this wooden desk, or actually any wooden object, it will dye the desk pink, and nothing will get it out of the desk except isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol, which means 91% pure or higher. That'll get it moving, but bleach won't do it, pen flush won't do it, nothing will do it except high concentration alcohol. This one was the same. So if you're using any of these pink inks, be careful with any wooden objects or wooden desks or anything. Just something to be aware of. It's random, but something I felt should be said. Oh, no, let's do this first. Okay. I wanted to see what this ink could stand up against, and it definitely could stand up against water. It did dye the page a little bit. But what was terrifying was that bleach didn't really get it moving so much. Now, it's no longer in the 78G, but it is still in this Preppy, so. But as you can see, it's a little bit lighter because it still has the dilution. So honestly, the reason why I haven't cleaned it out yet, because I hate pink, is because I'm terrified I'm never going to get that Preppy back. But yeah, so bleach didn't do a whole lot. Ammonia pen flush really didn't do much either. It moved it around but didn't break it up. Hydrogen peroxide started to break it up, but it also started to break up the paper, so. And for the record, I never recommend that you clean out any pen with hydrogen peroxide. Now, paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, it's a Baystate. It's definitely a Baystate. Alright, so here, and granted, okay, the 78G is going to have more feathering, but it is a wetter flowing ink and it is a broader nib, so it's going to be easier to see. So we got feathering here, we got it through here, but the thing is we also have it like here, all through the writing pretty much, and we actually get some with the Preppy as well. My camera. It's just harder to see because it's a finer line. But yeah, we do get a little bit of shading, not a ton. Now the Preppy dried in 5 seconds. The 78G double broad took 16. Yeah, it's problematic. And I'd say it's a slightly wet flow, like maybe a 5.5 flow. So and good lord, this is a bright pink. And we actually have a couple of spots, and that's the 78G, and so is that, where it nearly comes through. And granted, it is mostly the 78G, but still, I mean, this is 90 gram paper. I mean, let's just look at this for a second. That's intense, right? Now, this had been on the paper, I'd say dry for maybe 30 to 40 minutes. It did dye the page, and some did move, but what's at the center is very clear, very dark. So, yeah, there's that. Next up is Fabriano Eco Qua, 85 grams per square meter. Yeah, it's kind of more of the same. A lot of times this paper, one of the reasons why I love this Eco Qua stuff is it can oftentimes handle inks that even Clairefontaine and Rhodia have trouble with. But then there's this. I feel like that says something about just how aggressive this ink is. And it happens in a couple places. You know, I mean, it's not limited to single areas. Again, we don't get a ton of shading, but we do get some. The Preppy took 8 seconds to dry. The Double Broad 78G took 20. It's still painfully bright. It still feathers. Like a lot. It's disconcerting. And then we even get this. I mean, that is full-on bleed. At the bottom of feathers, the bottom of the F in feathers, came all the way through. This is the Preppy scrubby right here, the start of the Preppy scrubby. That is the 78G right there, but that's the Preppy. That's the Preppy. Yeah, it's worrisome. But again, this had been on the page dry for maybe 30 to 40 minutes. It did dye the page, some did move, but what's at the center is very clear, very dark, very readable. If you absolutely had to recover that, you could. Now, next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where we essentially get no shading anymore. Oh, we get a little, maybe. The Preppy took 5 seconds to dry. The broad and wet, or sorry, the double broad 78G took 14. But here we really get some intense feathering. And again, we get it with the Preppy as well. It's just harder to see because it's a finer line, and so the feathers are finer as well. But yeah, it's a problem. It's a very problem. Very, very big problem. I mean, it's an intense pink. If you want an intense pink, this is right up there. But I mean, that's the Preppy. That's the 78G. This line here is a 78G, but that's the Preppy. This is a 78G through here, but still, I mean, this is ceramic coated 80 gram paper. Anyways, this was probably dry 30 minutes, and it didn't dye the paper as much, and it didn't feather and explode any more than it already did. And it's very clear, very there. If you had to recover that, you could. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times, and for practically being impossible to, you know, make anything like feather or spread or bleed or anything through this, and this still managed to do it. So here, you see that? If it'll ever focus, there's some feathering there. I don't know if the camera will show it, but here, the T, you get feathering on Tomoe River. And even more surprising, that is not show-through. That is very, very near a bleed. In fact, those 3 dots and these 3 dots came all the way through, along with those 2 right there. That essentially started to come through. Those 3 dots came through. That P came through. Yeah, it did the seemingly impossible. We do get a little bit of shading here. Not a ton, but a little. And it did draw out dry times. It went from 5 seconds to 18. And here, that was for the Preppy. And then for the Devil Broad 78G, it went beyond 30. And I didn't want to count until it ended, so it honestly was probably something a lot closer to like 40 or 45 seconds. But yeah, so here, this paper loves to let things just slide away when you add more water. It kind of did, but it also kind of didn't. Here it just looks kind of smeary, right? But it did dye the page, but it's still fairly clear and fairly there, so if you had to recover that, you probably could. Now, here are the last 3 tests, the absorbent, inexpensive, or at least cheaply made papers. For these, I emptied out the cartridge, cleaned it out, and then very carefully measured 10% water, because I heard that can improve the performance. So, let's take a look. Alright, this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, and as you might be able to see, there's not a lot of feathering. It did get better in that way. I mean, there's like maybe a little here, the P right there, but not a lot. You know, it's very well behaved. There's no shading. It absorbed almost instantly. But we do get this, so this doesn't change about this paper. This paper loves to spread. So the line width definitely got broader. And the color changed a little bit. You know, it got a little brighter, a little more like Hope Pink. But, yeah, there are spots of bleed, but they really are just lots of little tiny spots. And there's some show-through, but it could be a lot worse. That was the 78G, which I used to write the name. Could be a lot worse. Yeah. And then here's the water test. More absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out. And that's definitely what happened here. I mean, look at this. It dyed the page a tiny little bit. It didn't feather, didn't explode, it's very readable, very there. If you had to recover that, you could. And next up is Mead Notebook Paper. And this is the type of Mead Notebook Paper that you might find in like a spiral notebook, like a 5-star. And lately this stuff has been feathering a good bit. But here, I mean, we do get some feathering, but not a whole lot. It's pretty well behaved in that regard. No shading. Again, it's more like a Hope Pink. It absorbed into the paper almost instantly. We don't really get any bleed. This is the 78G. But everywhere else, we get some echo. We get some. You can see some stuff from the other side, but it's not. It's still so light and so hazy that you can tell it never actually made it to the other side of the paper. So that's kind of impressive. But yeah, let's check out this water test. Again, it's a more absorbent paper, but very clear, very there. Didn't feather, didn't explode, and that's something this paper does tend to do. And the copier paper. A lot of times when you add water, it just freaks out. It turns into like a cactus monster. Here, not so much. Very clear, very readable, very recoverable. And here, where I do the big drop of water, you can still see every individual line in there. And look, didn't come out the back. That's impressive. Now lastly is Moleskine notebook paper. which I hate because they charge you so much for it, and the quality of the paper is actually very bad. And here we're going to see something kind of amazing. So let's check the spread on Mead and 20 pound, because the Mead didn't spread as much as the 20 pound. But then let's look at this. It spread nearly as much. In fact, if you look at the Platinum up there, it might have even spread more. No shading, took 1.5 seconds to dry, and here we get feathering, which we didn't really see much of on the other cheap papers. So that's disheartening. And then we get bleed. This rendered onto my desk. This was where it most ended up on my desk. And it was all of these little dots. Like 100 little dots. I was not happy about that. But this paper also tends to really do weird stuff when you add water. Here, it just got a little lighter. Dyed the page a little bit, but it didn't feather, didn't explode. The lines here are a little harder to differentiate, but whatever. Could have been worse. So, yeah, there you go. For your consideration, Noodler's Baystate Cape Cod Cranberry. It is absolutely everything about the ink that I hate, like color pink that I hate. It's my nightmare ink. Yeah. If you love pink, this be pink. However, well, yeah, you know, the 10% water thing actually kind of helped on the cheap paper. Apparently you can keep adding water and it should improve the performance further. But, you know, you have to be reasonable. I mean, these are still very cheap papers, you know, so I used a pretty fine nib, one that's generally pretty dry writing. Don't expect the moon. But you will, I mean, considering what we saw with the Rhodia. I mean, we saw Rhodia do this, right? I mean, it's just like a mess here on Rhodia. And then we go to Mead. It's very well behaved, you know? I mean, but yeah, so there you go. For your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.